Hey everyone, welcome back to Three Body Thinking. Zipatow, zipate. That's my intro music for today. It rhymed, completely accidental, but you're welcome for that. And also, if you know the movie Pootie Tang, you'll get the zipatow and all of that fun stuff. So if you have not seen Pootie Tang, I highly encourage you watch it if you enjoy B-rated movies that make you laugh for all the wrong and right reasons. So, anyways, today what we're talking about is kids. As a professional volleyball coach, I've done it now for over 15 years, all the way up to the NCAA Division One level and down to recreational 10-year-old volleyball, basically everything in between, boys and girls alike. And I've poured myself into learning about the human condition, society, and all of the things that attribute to making a human what they are and how they interact with the world and how they see the world. And in large part, that's the job of a coach, is to shape the mind of the next generation. And the environments that we build do that. So parents are really no different. They are coaching their kids through life. They're trying to build environments for them to hopefully survive and thrive in, and also one day become somebody that their parents are proud of and that they are the kids themselves. They're proud of who they are, and society as a whole, how we build government infrastructure, how we build communities, the things we do and don't allow, the things we call good and bad. All of this plays into the development of a single human life and how they see the world and interact with the world and what they believe to be true about the world. With that in mind, parenting is a massively critical aspect of that component. You're with them probably more than anybody else, at least until they're teenage years. And then in their teenage years, as we often know, they want to be with almost anybody but you as a parent, as they start to spread their wings through adolescence and explore the world and figure out who they are for themselves for the first time. They see that big separation of, the person who identifies themselves as a piece of the family, as their parent's child. That is who they see themselves as being, to somebody who is, that's a piece of them, but they're also wildly independent now, and they want to spread those wings and fly and fail a ton and challenge the world, challenge every aspect of society and what the norms are and what can and can't be broken. And they test the parents over and over again, as parents desperately do their best to just maintain some sense of control, to again, hopefully make sure that that child grows up to be an effective and productive member of society. With all of that said, I do want to talk about some things that I've noticed over the years. And before we even get going on this, I want to give a massive kudos to parents in general, because the data shows that the average parent today spends roughly double the amount of time with their child or children than a stay-at-home, well, be honest here, mother. I mean, very, very, very few stay-at-home dads back in the mid 1900s. So I'll just go ahead and say it, that parents today, whether male or female, are spending about double the amount of time that a stay-at-home mom did with their children in the mid 1900s, which is wild that somebody who is more than likely working a full-time job, or two parents working a full-time job and have bills to pay and ends to meet and all of that, is still making the time to be with their child or children twice as much as the average parent did in the mid 1900s. So while life has gotten a lot more complicated and busy, parents, you are doing an incredible job of meeting the needs of your children. Now, meeting the needs is where I want to start this conversation, because that can mean such wildly different things depending on what generation we are talking about. For most of human history, if you watched the Appeal to Nature Fallacy episode that I did, or listened to it, you'll know that majority of kids did not make it to their teenage years. I shouldn't say the majority, but a large chunk of kids. So if you had 5 kids, you were lucky to get three of them into adulthood. The other two probably died from something as simple as dysentery, or just having vomiting and diarrhea and getting dehydrated and not having an adequate water source. If you're crossing the prairie, or even if you're living in a town back in the 1800s, it's not like they had clean plumbing and access to IVs and medical care. So something as simple as a cut on your foot left untreated could go gangrene and turn into sepsis and blood poison, and then all of a sudden your 5-year-old is dead because they cut their foot on a rock and it got infected. So nature is wildly out to end life. It's not there to support and make sure everybody grows up to adulthood. It's very challenging. And thanks to modern medicine and science, we've greatly improved the lives of everybody. But what that means is that simply getting a child to survive to adulthood, that seems very basic to us today. But can you even get, if you have 5 kids, what are the odds that you can get all 5 kids to be adults and have children of their own and live into their 20s, 30s, 40s? That used to be the challenge. And obviously there's always been people with money and people that had greater access to resources that had better odds, but still not great. Even if you were the president of the United States back in the 1700s, that doesn't mean you have access to today's modern medicine. You're still working with the best at the time. So most illnesses, no matter how rich you were for most of human history, could still come for your kids. Now today, that's a little bit different. The richest of the rich have access to the best medical care around the world, but still cancer can come for anybody. And there are forms of cancer that are untreatable no matter how much money you have. And there are diseases that are untreatable no matter how much money you have. So even if you're, Elon Musk and the world's first trillionaire, there are diseases and illnesses that can come for your kids that you're just outmatched. You will lose that battle. But setting that aside, the majority of people, at least in developed worlds, and I'll say this in the United States, the majority of people who have 5 children will see all 5 children become adults. It's exceedingly less common for that not to be true, because again, we live in a world that is much more resource abundant and far more connected, so that you have resources that can travel from one side of the world to the other to meet the needs of really anybody in society. And again, I'm talking about generalities. There's parts of this world that are not deeply connected. There are parts of this world that by design are deeply unconnected. They don't have any ambitions or desires to be a part of the global economy. But again, talking in generalities here, a lot of people have access to enough, even if you're in the poorest section of the United States economy, you still have far greater access to resources today than most humans in history have. So I'm not saying that doesn't mean you won't be in massive medical debt and all these other problems that we have for the way we structure society. But simply speaking, you have access to medical care that the majority of humans throughout history have not, simply by being alive during this time. So what does it mean for a society then when just getting your kids to live used to be the bar? And, again, it's always been making them productive members of society, or even the family. Can they take over the family farm? Can they marry John or Susie at the farm next to us so then we can grow our impact? And we have, a lot of kids and marrying and all of that was in large part building connections and building a stronger foothold for your family to survive. This idea of marrying for love and all of that, which can be a separate episode another time, is actually fairly new. I mean, it's always been there throughout history, but the idea that that is the main way people around the world should be marrying is for love and their eternal partner is actually a fairly new concept in terms of how pervasive it is, that how much of a priority that has become. But anywho, getting back to you all parents. So if you had had your kid or kids just 200 years ago, you'd get a massive pat on the back if 4 out of 5 of them, 5 out of 5 of them, had kids of their own and were 30 years old. You did it. You crushed it. You're doing great. And again, speaking in generalities here, I'm sure if your kid was 30 and on the run for mass murder and bank robbing, then society wouldn't quite pat you on the back for that. But you did your job of a parent as getting these kids into adulthood. The bar was fairly low. And now, because it's just socially expected that your kid's going to survive and your kid's more or less going to be physically healthy, they're going to have access to the medicine they need, they're going to have access to the food that they need. And this is not true even in the United States of all incomes. But for the most part, kids are having their needs met, at least at a small enough level that they'll survive. Again, there are a lot of families, especially as SNAP benefits are being lost across this country and all that are finding it harder and harder. And they might just be eating boxed noodles and, boiled rice. And that's about all the calories they're getting every single day. But having that access alone almost guarantees they're still going to make it into adulthood. There's going to be a lot of health and mental ramifications of living life that way. So again, I'm not saying that everybody has a healthy and happy life ahead of them, no matter what their circumstances are. But circling back, even on rice and just boiled noodles, you'll get that kid to be an adult, almost guaranteed. Even with vitamin deficiencies and whatnot, that you'll have enough access to medical treatment and everything that you can get them to be an adult. So parents, when you live in a world where the expectation is no longer survival, but the expectation becomes thriving, and this is also coincide with the fact that people are having fewer kids. So now you don't have to have 5 kids in order to have 2 kids, meaning 3 would have passed away. Now you can have 1 kid and you're going to have 1 kid. You can have 2 kids and you're going to have 2 kids. You can have 3 kids and you're going to have 3 kids. Statistically speaking, that's almost guaranteed, far closer to being guaranteed than ever in human history before. So if you're going to have a kid and the expectation is no longer just survival, what does the expectation become? Well, as the baby boomers have absorbed so much of the economy, I mean, we're talking about the largest transfer of wealth coming up in the next 20 years as baby boomers all die off and pass along their money to the next generation. It will be the largest transfer of wealth in human history. So what does it mean to grow up where the baby boomers saw exponential life quality growth and financially access to resources and all of that in the last 50 years has taken off? So then if survival is no longer the goal, what do you do with that excess money? What do you do with that excess resource? The fact that families are now only having 1 to 3 kids, with the average, I think, being close, and don't quote me on this one, I have not looked this number up, but I want to say that the average American families has like 1.6 kids now, which I know people aren't having 0.6 of a kid, but just if you average out the numbers. So you're having fewer kids with more resources and a better and more connected world with access to more resources. So what does that lead to? It leads parents feeling obligated to do better for their children. So survival is no longer the issue. What are you going to do with that extra, even if it's just $200 a month in your bank account? What are you going to do with your extra $1,000 a month? For some families, what are you going to do with your extra tens of thousands of dollars a month that you make in income now? And the answer to a lot of that has been to pour it into their kids. So again, just speaking strictly to the sports side, youth sports in the early 2000s was in the like hundreds of millions of dollars as a sector of the economy, maybe breaking into the low billions. And then around 2015 to 2020, it outgrew and outpaced the NFL. So in a quick 20 years, youth sports went from just being something that you did in your neighborhood. I mean, I grew up, and I'm only in my 30s, and I grew up in a time where most of my youth sports was spent playing with hockey sticks in my street with my neighbors, or grabbing a baseball bat and a tennis ball in our cul-de-sac and playing baseball, or playing front yard football where one driveway is one end zone and the next driveway is the other end zone, and you're just trying to play football like that. Those are the sports that I grew up with. I also played organized sports. Most of it was recreational through like the school district that I went to. Pretty low bar, pretty low standards. And then eventually I got into club sports, club basketball to be precise. And it took me about 4 years to burn out on that, to where practicing 4 nights a week for basketball was just too much for me and my passion wasn't there. And so I quit before I was even done in high school, which is the norm. Far more kids who pick up sports will quit than go on to be even college athletes, let alone professional athletes. The amount of kids that go on to become professional athletes is less than 1%. You're like in the 1% of the 1%. And the amount of kids that go on to play college sports is less than 10% across all sports. I mean, for volleyball specifically, it's around 6% roughly on the women's side, even smaller on the men's side. So we have all of these resources being poured into kids, that has, even in my lifetime, gone from, again, in the hundreds of millions, low billions, to outpacing the NFL, which means that youth sports around in the 2015 to 2020 timeframe was worth about 20 billion, a little south of that, which outpaced what the NFL brings in. And now from 2020 to 2030, youth sports is on pace to approach 100 billion. I mean, it's supposed to land somewhere in the 70 to 80 billion range. So it went from, again, probably less than $1 billion to, in 20 years, being more than the NFL and 20 billion, to just 10 years later having a threefold increase, almost fourfold increase into the 70, 80 billion range. And then, the sky's the limit from there. And so that alone, just in the lens of youth sports, shows how much more money and time parents are putting into kids, that playing pickup whatever in your front yard is no longer the priority. If you're going to do that, then we are going to go ahead and just pay the $3,000 for a season of basketball so that you can travel and make friends and do all of that. A lot of it's also very keep up with the Joneses. I mean, you see other people's social media and, little Johnny that we used to play in the backyard with now has, goes to 3 different states every year to play basketball. And now my little, Anthony is super upset because he wants to do that too. And, I don't want to let him down. I don't want to feel like a failure. I want to make sure that I'm giving my kid the same amount of resources that everybody else is giving their kids. So all of a sudden you make the tough decision to keep up, to make sure that you invest in your kid as much as the next person invests in their kid. And there is now a massive $1 billion economy around parents and trying to make them, if we're being honest here, feel inadequate. Like, are you doing enough? Are you raising your kid the right way? Have you put enough time and money and energy into them? There's so many books on parenting now, and social media influencers, and even just in the mainstream media, just so much on parenting and the next generation, and are we raising them right, and are we doing things the way we're supposed to, and are you meeting their emotional needs, and are you taking care of them physically? And you can see one social media post that says, I was basically tortured growing up because XYZ happened, and then you can scroll to the next one and it says, if you aren't doing what that person says is torture, then you're letting your kids down because you're not being tough enough on them, and everything in between. So you're drowning parents in a sea of information strictly because content equals money. If you can say you're the baby mom and nobody takes care of babies like you do, and you're the best mom that takes care of babies, and you can get 1 million people to believe it and follow you, then that turns into money. That turns into attention economy. So parents and kids in a service-based economy, which the United States is. The United States is a service-based economy. We're no longer a goods economy. Majority of our money as a country, our GDP, is from services, not from goods. So a massive leg of that is parents and kids. I mean, kids are almost entirely untapped potential for an economy. Again, they were getting little to no money put into them. They were more likely to be riding a bike through the neighborhood than they were to be playing, sports that span the entire nation. So now that we can convince parents to take that excess money and put it into their kids, and then also make them feel bad about whether or not they're doing enough, so then you can make, 2 birds, 1 stone. You can make money off the parent who's going to buy a book or watch the social media or subscribe or do whatever. And then you're also going to make money off the kid that now feels like they need to be signed up for something because the mom feels like they're letting that child down because they're not doing enough for their children. And it's just a perpetual cycle of feedback loop that parents, you aren't doing enough, so do more for your kids, and that costs more money. And now that your kids are doing more, they have more stress. And now you can tell that they're just go, 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 and they need a planner, and they need a, and when I say planner, like an organizer, because they just have so much on their calendar. And parents have become chauffeurs and secretaries for their kids. I mean, the amount of parents that I talk to that's like, oh yeah, my husband's dropping off Jimmy at football, and then he's going to go grab dinner for Susan because she needs to eat before she goes to softball, which is why I'm at volleyball today. And then we got to take them to coding camp next week, which means we're not going to do any of those sports next week because they have to go learn to code, because we saw that the AI sector is really taking off, and we just want to make sure that they're prepared. Like, it's just nonstop. I mean, some of these kids have crazier schedules than a CEO of a company. And I don't have data to prove that, but I can tell you, as somebody who knows CEOs of companies, and I can see the amount of time that they spend golfing and fishing and doing other stuff, and the amount of time that these kids have to go from one sport to the next, to the next, to the next, is wild. I mean, they are living incredibly busy lives. And parents are and are not to blame for that. I mean, parents are trying to keep up with the Joneses, so they're doing their best. So you can't really fault them just for trying to help their kids. But then also, the more they buy into it and the more money they dump into it and the more they feel they need to catch up, then again, it's just that self-perpetuating cycle. So it takes a very strong and confident parent to say, no, I'm not going to sign up for that. No, we're going to spend our money elsewhere. We're going to take a family vacation. Instead of spending money on club sports, or spending money on all of the camps, whether they're related to sports or not. I mean, this could be youth camps, this can be leadership camps, this can be anything. And I'm saying all of this coming from the world. Like, I know how deeply youth sports can impact a kid, and I think they're insanely valuable. And I want them to be done well, and I want them to be done right, so that we can put our best foot forward and meet the needs of these kids. So don't hear this as a complete knock against what I personally do for a living. But as with any industry, there's always ways to improve it, and there's ways to make it healthier and stronger and more fortified. So parents, where I'm going with this is, you have so much on your plates to deal with, and that's work, that's meeting the needs of your husband or your spouse, your significant other, who now, again, we are marrying for love. You're supposed to be their eternal rock. You're supposed to be their everything, which there's so much science and research on this that is wildly inappropriate. The idea that one person in your life should be your confidant and your ride or die and the person that you laugh with every single day and just totally gets you is wild, and is very new to humans in society, that be the expectation for everybody. I mean, it's important that you have your gal pals, that you have your guy friends. It's important that you have somebody that you can talk to about XYZ, while your spouse, you can talk about ABC. We have made the nuclear family almost entirely secluded and internally dependent on each other. The parents just need to depend on the kids and the spouse, and the kids just need to depend on the parents. We've lost the idea of parenting, the idea that the community would help raise. I mean, there's a lot of research on tribes that they know mothers need help. So for 3 hours of the day, that baby spends time with other women, sometimes even breastfeeding from other women in the tribe, just to help mom cope with all of the difficulties of being a new mother. We've grossly lost that. I mean, sleepovers, again, I don't have the numbers to prove this, but just from talking to kids, are getting less and less common. I am personally, in my own neighborhood, see kids just running out in the street, running out in the neighborhood far less. It is either you're with your family in your own house, or you are paying to go do something like a sport or a camp or a clinic or some opportunity. The idea of just being with community is being drastically reduced, at least in America, which again means that your little Timmy and Susie are not going across the street to Auntie Jane and Uncle Jim. And I say that in quotations because really they're just deeply ingrained pieces of the community. They're not actually related to you, but they might as well be, because your kids see them as family. We're losing that. the idea that I'm going to call them my cousin or my uncle or my niece or my nephew, even though we're genetically not related at all, just because the community runs so deep. A lot of healthy habit and community forming has been lost because of the idea, again, that the nuclear family is all you ever need. And that weighs on parents because now you have to be everything for the kids. You have to, and which is why we see, again, you spending double the amount of time with your kids that parents used to, because no longer are American families comfortable just saying, I don't know, I haven't seen my kids since like 8 a.m. and I won't see them until the street lights come on. And they know when the street lights come on, if they don't come back, they're in trouble. Even again, in my generation, millennials, that was the case. I fondly, it's such a great memory of seeing street lights come on and realizing I'm on the other side of the neighborhood and just being like, oh crap. And then just running home as fast as I can. Because I can't be late. I can't be late. I can't be late. I got to run as fast as I can to get home. And my parents didn't know where I was at for the last, 4 hours. I have a scar on my finger from almost cutting my finger off because without permission, and that's a key part of this, without permission, I grabbed a saw with a friend of mine and we went to go make a tree fort near a creek that was about a quarter mile away from our house. I almost cut my finger off doing it and I ran home screaming bloody murder and I got taken to the ER. But if a kid did that today, a parent would be seen as almost negligent. Like, you let your kid, why aren't they locked up in a safe? We keep all of our knives, we only have butter knives in the house to make sure, like, again, it's just such protectionary. We expect everybody to live into adulthood. We don't want them to take risks. We want them to go sign up for a clinic to go do something rather than just exploring and figuring life out for themselves, which does contain potential risk and danger. It is far more dangerous for a kid to grab a saw without permission and go to the woods than it is for them to show up where there's an instructor and you've already paid in advance and you've signed a liability waiver and the ER is 2 blocks away and you're there watching the entire time. So we've cocooned our kids in this virtual and sometimes quite literal physical bubble of protection. All of that adds pressure to the belief that parents could screw their kids up at any point. I mean, that is what this whole talk basically boils down to, is that parents now live in a society where one wrong move, one night of their child crying, whatever, might be the reason they're bad parents. And they believe that with social media. Is your kid, not eating their vegetables, then you're a failure as a parent. And then the next one will be, I couldn't leave the table until I finished all my vegetables. And that was basically torture. So if your kids only want to eat nuggets and mac and cheese for the rest of their life, you should do that because that's freedom and that's choice. And you will see those videos back to back. And then as a parent, you got to decide which way you're going to fail as a parent. I mean, it's a long string of you just feeling like a failure because of how society has painted everything. Again, we have switched from, did you keep them alive and are they basically functioning adults now? Great, you crushed it, you did your job. To all of a sudden, you didn't sign them up for that? Oh man, you're not worried they're not going to get into college? Oof. You didn't save up enough, they have to pay, they have to take out loans. You know what college costs these days? Oh man. And then that 25-year-old that can't get a job and is still living with you. Like, it's just constant. Like, there's so much about our society that is, again, built into just forced dependence on the nuclear family, which only adds stress to the fact that as a parent, you're the sole responsibility of whether or not your kids turn out okay, which is wildly distant from the truth. A lot of research shows that parents, as much as they want to have influence over the kids, and they do, much of that influence is actually what their kids want it to be. So when you sit them down and you give them a stern talking to, and you believe that that's the reason they're going to be structured and they're going to become a CEO someday because you sat them down once a week and you talked about how they need to plan out their schedule and all of this, might actually be the reason that they drop out of college and say screw it because their life has been so organized for them that the second they actually experience freedom, they run for the hills. It could also be the reason that they do become a CEO and life is absolutely miserable and they hate it because all they've ever known is what you've told them to do. And again, now I'm perpetuating the issue of I'm telling you that you might be a bad parent by doing these things. The point that I'm really trying to make is you have no idea. The fact that you have those conversations is what you think is going to bleed into your kids, when really what they're going to see is that you show up home from late every single day because you're working so much, and they just want more dad time. And even though you've been preaching like you got to be a CEO and this is how you lived a structured life, their main takeaway was that CEOs don't spend any time with their family, that they come home at 9 o'clock at night, and whenever that their kid wants to play catch with them, they say no because they have a meeting. And that turns them off from it, that they don't want that life. They want something simpler. This is the unfortunate and fortunate part of being a parent, is no matter how hard you try to directly influence it, a lot of what actually influences are the things that you don't know they're picking up on. The way you dance in the car on the way to work, that makes them feel safe and secure, and they see that what it's like to love going to work, and that has a massive impact on them. The way you always pull over and hand money to the homeless, the way you talk on the phone to people who are in need and they just overhear the conversation of you letting them know, like, I'm always here for you and I'm gonna help you. Like, just those moments in the thousands, if not millions, over the years with you, all those random moments, the things you don't realize you're doing, are all actually what raises them and informs who they want to be as an adult and who they find themselves to be as a human. It's oftentimes when you try and make structured decisions, you're like, this is how I'm going to attack. I'm actually going to have a 12-point plan on how to be a parent, that it tends to backfire more because you can't force it. And they are independent people, and their genetics are different from yours, and how they view the world is different. The time they're growing up in is different. And all it takes is one friend in fourth grade who has a different kind of parent, and they get exposed to that, and all of a sudden they're questioning so much about your parenting and your relationship and all of that. There is 99% of who your kids are going to be is wildly out of your hands. And I'm telling you that again to like release the pressure. I'm trying to push us back to like, did they survive? You crushed it type of mode. But also with that, realizing that kids need to not be okay. And that's an important life lesson. So the more we have put money into it, it's like, okay, well, if I spent $5,000 on doing this club thing, then they need to have good memories, and it needs to be fun, and they need to be happy, and they need to make friends, and they need to do all this, and it needs to be exciting, and they should always show up and want to go to practice. But that's not life. Like, even the things you love most, volunteering or a hobby that you have, there are times in your life where you want to do anything but that. You want to wake up in the morning and say, I don't want to have to think about this. I would rather do anything else than whatever this is today. Or maybe your hobby, you take 3 months off from it just because it's just too much on your plate and it's burning you out a little bit. Like, the range of human emotions needs to be felt even for kids. That's sadness, that's fear, that's grieving, that's anxiety. Like, so many of these words are buzzwords now that are seen as needing like therapeutic level of attention. That if you're a child, misses a game point, and again, I'm talking a lot through the lens of youth sports because that's my closest connection to the youth. If your kid misses a game point opportunity and they immediately, you can tell it just crushes them. Their shoulders are down. Maybe they're crying already before they're even off the court or the field. And you can tell that their teammates, some of them are good and patting them. It's so okay. It's not your fault. And you can tell some of them are just upset in their own right and they have their own thing going on. So they're not even looking at your kid. And you're scanning the parents because you're like, shit, are all the parents going to be upset with me because, my kid, like, clearly it was my kid's fault. And what are they thinking? Or maybe you're the opposite. This wasn't my kid's fault. It was just one mistake. There were 20 mistakes throughout this game that easily could have led, but it just happened to be the last mistake of the game. I really hope they're not judging my kid. Like, there's all these thoughts that go on. And then we immediately, again, want to bubble wrap and protect that kid. We want to say, that it's okay and you're okay. And let's go get a smoothie because you should feel happy again. But feeling the utter crushing defeat of losing on game point only shows how much emotion there is on the other side of that swing. So when we don't allow for the depth of the painful experiences, we also do not allow for the peaks of the positive experiences. If you want that game point kill to feel like you moved heaven and earth because it was so special, then that's going to take a massive amount of emotional and physical investment. which should also mean that if you miss out, it should hurt, and it should hurt bad. Hurting is not the issue. What it also means is that your kids should feel stress and anxiety. They're showing up to the championship game. It's okay for them to have butterflies. It's okay for them to say they're stressed and they have anxiety. It's okay for them to think like, oh my gosh, what if I fail? What if I don't show up? It's 100% okay for their confidence to waver as they go into those moments. It just shows you how important it is to them. And then it is on us as coaches and us as parents to help them navigate that. Like, it's okay to feel that pain. What are we going to do with that energy? How are we going to respond to it? How are we going to recover from it? It is so important to have those conversations. And when you immediately just try and mask and hide all of the pain and sadness and anxiety and like, no, we shouldn't feel that way. Again, let's go have a smoothie. Let's listen to that music. Go get your headphones. Go put your music on. Maybe you should play a game with friends. Maybe you should do a TikTok dance or something like that. Just do anything but feel pain and anxiety. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's not good. We need you to feel happy. And this eternal idea of like perpetual happiness is not healthy. Instead, those conversations should be like, tell me why it hurts. Like, where's the pain coming from? Where do you physically feel it in your body? What do you think that tells you about this moment? And they might tell you like, it just sucks. I really let my team down. Tell me why you think you let your team down. And you can explore that headspace and talk with them. But pain is always going to be an aspect of their life. It should be. They should want to shoot for lofty things and fail. Failure should be a big part of life. Helping them work through those emotions is key. So I challenge parents, coaches, everybody to put them in difficult situations. Kids should be challenged. Kids should be fearful. They should try and attach themselves to something so deeply that they experience true pain and loss when it's no longer there, or that relationship has changed. I mean, we all remember our first love, most likely. And as a parent, you look at them. For me, it was when I was 14 years old and she broke up with me, and her mom was sitting in the living room and I was sitting on the stairs right in front of their doorway to exit the house. And that's where I got broken up with. And the mom's sitting on the couch watching TV and eating a snack as I'm bawling my eyes out and like pleading, like, please take me back. What did I do wrong and all of this? I mean, my life had ended in that moment. And the mom just yells over the top and goes, don't worry, she'll marry you someday. Y'all are perfect for each other. And honestly, like, that's not a bad response as a parent to just say like, life goes on. But in that moment, as a parent today, we would want to, rescue them and make sure that they know that, as that mom said, life will go on and things will be better. And we want to help them escape it as quickly as possible. Instead, what a parent can do in those situations is sit in the moment with them, that empathetic shoulder to lean on. Just like, tell me why it hurts. Tell me, how does this feel? I haven't felt this way in so long, and your generation is so different. What's it feel like today? Like, how does that feel to you? What do you think it means to you? Where do you want to go from here? How is this going to inform? Like, all these questions, and you don't have to do that all in the moment. It can be over days or weeks or months that you help them walk through that. But if they thought they had their first love and that was taken away from them, they should grieve, and it should feel like a painful grieve. If the love of their life breaks up with them and you call them like, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, I just want to get a smoothie. And that's the first thing your kid says, then they didn't really care that much to begin with. So again, if you want your kids to feel the true blessing of like accomplishment and achievement and success in life and happiness and joy, then you have to also help them experience the valleys, because you never know how tall the mountain is until you look at it from the lowest point on earth, right? So if you're trying to convince them that this mountain view is so gorgeous and all they've ever known is the mountain view, then the way brain chemistry works is like they don't have that comparative analysis to look at. So if they're lived at the peak of a mountain and they go 100 feet down, that's going to feel like a valley to them. I mean, if they get unhappy for a day, they're going to feel like, I need to see a doctor. I'm depressed. And you see kids all the time now diagnosing themselves. I'm autistic. I'm not neurodivergent. I'm depressed. I'm ADHD. And they just diagnose and diagnose and diagnose, because They don't know how, like, they don't know the normal range of emotions. They don't know the normal range of attention. They don't know the normal range of stuff. So then when they walk 20 feet down the peak of the mountain, they're like, oh my God, it can't get much worse than this. I can't handle it. You have to let them experience the valleys. And then when they're halfway down the mountain, they're like, I'm still on the mountain. Like, this sucks. This hurts, but I'm still in a good place. And I can feel this pain and still know that I'm okay as a human, because they've been to the valley and they're like, I know true darkness. I know what it's like to lose my grandparent. I know what it's like to lose my dog. I know what it's like to lose the love of my life. I know that pain. So I know that this pain is doable, that I'll get to the other side of it. So parents, we need to stop hiding them from difficult emotions. We need to be willing to go through those difficult emotions with them and help them process that they can make it to the other side, and give them tools so that they can think both emotionally but also critically about what they're experiencing. And then they can make healthy and informed decisions moving forward. The only time you need to really be concerned is not that the level of emotion that they're feeling, but is the level of emotion appropriate for the situation? So if you tell them, I'm not going to buy you a hot dog at dinner, and they start throwing up because they're so, I can't breathe, I'm so freaking out. And they start throwing up, and then they are like, I have to go home, I have to be in my room. And then you take them home and they sit in their room and they won't come out the next day, and they ask if you can call them in sick, all because you said they couldn't have a hot dog for dinner. Well, then that's not appropriate. Like, that does need a deeper level of addressing, and you need to, potentially seek out extra help for that. But again, if your child comes home and is like, I can't breathe, I can't go to school tomorrow, please don't make me go to school tomorrow. And then you ask them why, and it's because the person that they thought they were going to marry, even though they're only 14, broke up with them. I would say, oh, crap. Yeah, that's heavy. I get it. Let's sit in this for a moment. Like, let's talk through this. So one of the keys is the level of response appropriate for the moment? If your child loses on game point again, and they are, say, like, I just feel like I can't do this. Like, that's not necessarily an unhealthy response for them to feel anxiety and panic and frustration or despair around that moment, if it means a ton to them. If they, for the first time ever, poured themselves into a sport and put more of their self and their identity into anything that they've ever done before, and all of a sudden that thing that they love and they work towards so much feels like it has failed them, or that they have failed that thing, that should really hurt. And then just working with them in the moment to say, hey, it is amazing that you had the opportunity to feel this pain. It is amazing that your team, trusted you enough to take the game-winning shot. And I really want to make sure that the next time you have that opportunity, you take the shot again. I mean, that's Michael Jordan quote that I'm going to paraphrase, which is essentially that he's missed more game-winning shots than he's ever made. I think he gives the exact number in that quote, but that's the idea, is like, if you want to make the game-winning shot, you have to keep taking game-winning shots. So that should feel exciting and tough and emotional, and the ones you miss on should piss you off or make you upset, and maybe you want to punch a wall, or maybe you want to squeeze a teddy bear. But if you care enough to invest yourself in something, those moments should hurt. Just as much as when you make it, you should want to be lifted up and then paraded around the court, and you should want people texting you the next day and be like, I heard about the shot, I saw it on your highlight reel, that's so cool. And like, if you want both sides of it, you have to allow for both sides of it. One of the big emotions, I'm going to call it an emotion, is boredom, that we are greatly missing out on these days. I mean, had my two nieces and we went on vacation together, and they both desperately wanted their phone because they were going to play a game and they needed to come up with ideas for the game. And so basically they needed prompts. So what are the prompts going to be for this game? And my niece wanted her phone for that. I said, just come up with them on your own. She goes, I'm not good at coming up with them on my own. I go, well, that's the problem. You need practice at it. She goes, yeah, but I could just look it up on social media and it'll give me like 1,000 prompts. And then we can just play right away. And I said, no, that's the whole point, is to struggle and do it and to work through it. She's like, I'm just not that good though. I'm never going to come up with 1,000 prompts. I'm just not that good. And so this reliance on the easy way out for kids, because they don't experience boredom, and they've never had to work through. Again, the reason I almost cut my finger off is because I was bored with a friend and we were like, let's build a fort. That's creative. The outcome wasn't fantastic, but I remember sitting in that creek and we built a little dam and we took rocks and we actually diverted the water route and all of that. Granted, maybe if there's an ecologist looking at this or something, like, you shouldn't have done that, but that's what we did, and we started cutting down tree branches and thinking, okay, what tree branch can we build on? We stood on them and we like swung on them for support to see if they could hold our weight. So we're learning all of these mathematics and physics and engineering principles simply because we were bored enough to go grab a saw and build a fort and then build a rock dam in a little creek. Like, kids these days need to be bored to figure things out. I want to stress again that many of these kids have schedules that match that of a CEO's. I mean, when I work with kids and they go from tennis to basketball to coding camp to piano rehearsal and then back to basketball, and then they go and lift weights all in one day, and they're just go, 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 constantly on the move. And if they're not at their thing, they're typically in the car with their parents because the parents have to take the other kid to another thing. And so it's just constantly always something to be done. And please don't hear this as they need to be sitting on the couch watching TV more, that as a family, you guys should just sit on the couch more and be bored together and watch TV. That's not the replacement. The replacement is to shut off all technology, play an actual board game, or go sit outside in hammocks, or go play catch in the backyard, or something I can't even think of right now. Build a fort, grab blankets and pillows and build a fort. Like, all of these are lost arts. That's engineering, that's STEM. So when we hear we need more women in STEM, that more kids need to be inspired by STEM, how do we respond to that? We build more engineering camps. We build more opportunities in school for women, to boys and girls alike, but especially there was a push for women to be more involved in, mathletes and math clubs and engineering clubs and robotics and all these other things. And we built scholarships for it. I'm not saying any of that is wrong, but again, just building a fort in your backyard and then trying to stand on it for the first time and going straight through all the twigs and then crashing to the ground teaches you a lot about physics and engineering, because now you're going to look at it and you're understanding, without knowing the words, what structural integrity is. That what is the weight bearing load for this system? How do we increase that? You're answering all of these questions without knowing you're answering these questions, simply because you're bored enough to build a fort. Kids need to go through that. Kids need to be alone with themselves more often. And that goes really for everybody. Try spending even 5 minutes in your car in silence as you're driving to work or going to the grocery store. I almost guarantee you're scrolling on your phone, you're sending a text message, you're calling somebody, you're listening to a podcast, you're listening to music, any of those things. And the reason why I know that is also because I do it. I'm so bad at this. I absolutely need to work on being just by myself more and just listening to my thoughts. My brain gets going a million miles per hour, and then all of a sudden, I like that thought. I have a question. I need to go search that online, and I need to make a note of that in my tab so I don't forget it later. And like, everything is always planning for what's to come, and every thought I have has to be important enough to be in my notepad, or for me to do a search online about it, or for me to go look up a podcast about it, or for me to everything in my head always has to be of value. And boredom teaches you the opposite, which is it's okay to sit there and have thoughts that you'll never think again. It's okay to sit there and quote unquote waste 3 hours just counting the bark on a tree, because what you don't realize is the next time you look at a tree, you're going to see it in a completely different way. Or you're going to notice those small things. You're training your brain how to notice the small things in life that you typically don't notice in that moment. There's so much to be learned from boredom. It's painful. Boredom is painful, but it forces your brain to be creative, and it forces your brain to explore regions that are probably underutilized on your day-to-day. So boredom, parents, please, 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 I hope we give our kids, and as a society, more chances just to be bored. I would love more kids just playing in the street again, coming up with some brand new game that involves a hockey stick and a bicycle and a football and a frisbee, and it's an obstacle course game, and if you can do it under 20 seconds, then you win. Like that is creative ingenuity. But now kids just show up and they say, "Oh, there's the instructor. Go do whatever they tell you to do." And it's just always with the intention. Kids are learning these days that every single dollar, every single ounce of energy they put into something has to pay off somewhere down the road, right? We're going to this clinic so I can get better at learning how to do art. I'm going to this clinic so I can be a better athlete. I'm going to this clinic so I can be a better leader. I'm going to this clinic so that I can get into college someday because it's going to build my resume. I'm going to volunteer because I need the hours for my church, whatever it is. Like there is always an end game with everything. And that is the world kids are growing up in, is just that there's always has to be an end game. We've lost the ability just to do things for the sake of doing them, which again goes back to the loss of community. The only way I know adults hang out anymore is like, oh, there's a show we need to watch. We need to do this thing, rather than just, I'm going to come hang out at your house for the next 3 hours. And then you speak all of, 10 minutes of words in those 3 hours to each other because they're just hanging out and you're doing laundry and all of that. Or maybe you talk the entire time, but you're never even in the same room because, again, you're busy cleaning and doing stuff and they're just sitting on your couch hanging out. You're both bored together. I mean, we've lost that art to just exist with people without there being an end game. Let's just hang out for the sole reason of being around each other and enjoying each other's company. That is a lost art. It always has to be transactional in some way, that we are hanging out to deepen our relationship or do something like that. Like that can just be unspoken. You can just understand that in that moment, we are expressing how much we love and care for each other by prioritizing the opportunity to be around each other when we don't need to be, rather than feeling the need to make it explicitly known, like, oh, I want to see you this Friday because we haven't seen each other in so long, and yada, yada. Like it always has to be planned. Again, we go back to the idea that just being a kid or just having a relationship becomes a CEO's life, somebody that always has stuff on their calendar and is doing something together. We've grossly underestimated the power of just existing together and being bored together. Just sitting on a patio and being a neighbor that walks by and just walks up to the patio and hangs out with you, and you shoot the breeze for an hour, because why not? Instead, now it's guys' night and you got to coordinate it 2 months in advance because everybody's so busy. And honestly, if I was sitting on my patio and a neighbor came up to me now, I'd be blown away, because we all act like we want nothing to do with each other in my neighborhood. And that's not true of everybody that I know, but in large part, there are a great number of people who will walk by and intentionally stare at the ground to not make eye contact with you. And these are people that live 4 houses away from me that I see every single day. And they just do their darndest to make sure that, our paths don't cross. That's the world that we live in. And again, those are the same people who, rather than have their kids go explore the neighborhood with the other kids in the neighborhood that are of different ages, are also the people that are going to take their kids and go sign them up for other stuff. So their social network and their lives are actually deeply disconnected from the physical world that they exist in, because everything that they do, they got to drive their kids to go here, and they got to go here to do this, and they got to go here to do this, instead of just playing street ball in the front yard with the people that you're physically close with. The community that you're, again, physically in is no longer actually your community. Your community is a spider web branched out across the entire city of different places. So it's creating this feeling of constant need to be moving and doing something, because you can't just sit in the backyard and interact with people. It has to be planned and paid for and programmed. So it's really unfortunate, and it's highly American. America's not the only one to do this, and every country probably has its, parts of society that do life this way. But there are also many countries around this world that highly value just being together with people in an environment with no purpose. Like, just when I had visited Valencia in Spain, there were beach volleyball courts set up. And while I was visiting, I went and just made friends with some of the locals, and then found out that was just kind of their routine, that every day during lunch, they would just go down there and set up a net and play a little bit, and other people would walk by and join in. And could you imagine here in America, just throwing up a net during your lunch break from work, and then just having people come and play and hang out? even if it was on the corporate lawn of the building that you work at, so they don't even have to go very far. Just during the hey, at noon, we're all going to get together on the front lawn and we're going to play catch together. Coworkers would look at you like you're crazy. Why? Because none of their like you're not their friends now. You're their friends. Their network is again spidered across the region that they live in, or maybe even across the nation. And that's their network of people. It's not the people that you're physically close with anymore. We've lost that sense of community. Which, bringing this full circle, because I do feel like this was a little bit of a tangent, that goes back to all of the pressure that parents feel. No longer can you just run to the house next door, knock on the door and say, I'm so sorry to do this, but I gotta go pick up Timmy from football. Can you just keep an eye on Susie while I'm gone for the next 45 minutes? And your neighbor not look at you like, I've never said 2 words to that child. Who are you? Like, I know you live next to me, but we've never even shook hands before. Like, that's more likely the response you would get rather than somebody that would say like, well, yeah, just send them over. Come hang out. That's great. Our communities are deeply broken, which again, puts all of the effort, time, energy, and focus back on the nuclear family. You have to be everything for your kids. Your kids have to be everything for you. You cannot fail them at any turn because they're just experiencing all of life through the lens of you. That is the system that we've set up, basically. And when it's not through the lens of you, it's through a highly calibrated, highly selected lens that you still want them to see through. What I mean is, they're not just down the street playing with little Johnny and you have no idea what little Johnny is teaching your little Susie because they're just out being kids and building forts and creating games and talking about, oh, well, my dad said this. Oh, well, my dad said this and my mom said this. Instead of letting your kids do that because you don't control that, you're going to sign them up for the camp, the clinic, the lesson, the whatever, the team, because then you still have the power of control. Okay, I vetted this club, I vetted this coach, I vetted this teacher, I vetted this camp. I know exactly what they're going to learn. I know what it's going to be like, and I approve of it. It has my stamp. So kids are more and more only exposed to what you want them to be exposed to. And that is all an attempt for you to, again, curate who you think that they will be, but also an attempt to just not let them down. I cannot highlight enough in this conversation of how difficult it is to be a parent today. Just the amount of resources and money you're expected to spend or that you feel the need to expend, and what it means to do right by your kids and invest in them enough has just exponentially gone through the roof. So I'm going to say it one more time that as a parent today, you are most likely spending twice the amount of time with your kids as a stay-at-home mom did in the mid-1900s, which is incredible. It's insane that you have all of that pressure on top of just being a normal functioning adult on your own. So with all of that said, parents, my takeaways for you are, 1, get off the social media scroll. Like, stop challenging yourself to be the best version of a parent that you can be against the voices of social media. I encourage you to think a little bit more that if they live to be an adult, that's success. They don't have to be a CEO. They don't have to have tons of college opportunities. They don't have to have an incredibly high paying job. Like, all these things don't have to be the definition of success. You don't have to sign them up for all these camps and clinics and stuff in any sport or art or theater or anything. Like, we as communities need to build those opportunities again for cheap and for free. And that can be simply by going over to their friend's basement and putting on a play that they made up in their own head. I mean, who watching this, if you're a millennial, hasn't recorded on their video camera, big old handheld video camera, them doing a music video or a rap video or whatever to their favorite song when they were 10 years old. Like, those are the things kids need to be experiencing more of, not less of. That whole afternoon where they just did a whole set design and a music video design rather than being signed up for a camp and clinic that afternoon is so important for kids building their own identity, finding out what they can and can't do, and learning how to be self-sufficient and learning who they are and then building their own community. Now they know they can trust this friend, and they build those deep relationships rather than just knowing that Susie's the person I do volleyball with on Tuesdays. Instead, Susie's the one that I'm bored and ready to tear my hair out with. So we made this awesome thing together and we put all of our time and energy into it. And like it completely took over our entire life for 8 hours of one day just to make this 5-minute video that we thought was so cool. Like we need more of that in kids. So parents, I encourage you to not feel bad for not signing them up for stuff and instead prioritizing play dates that you're not supervising, that you're just letting them be wild and free. I encourage families to do more no tech night. If you're going to have your friends and their kids over, everybody put their phone away and just sit on a patio and play catch and do whatever, or everybody come inside and play an actual board game together. I encourage us to disconnect from this. We don't have to post about the brats being the best brats you've ever had and your husband or spouse did such a good job of cooking that. Like, just be disconnected from that broad web of network and be locally connected to the people that are in your lives in that moment by disconnecting from technology. Parents, also make sure that your kids experience the full breadth of emotion, that it's okay for kids to not be okay. It's important for kids to not be okay. And that does not mean, because I hate this when coaches take on the I'm going to be a monster in their life so that they can handle other monsters. That's not what I'm talking about at all. That's not what I'm talking about as a parent. That's not what I'm talking about as a teacher or coach. I'm not saying that we need to be the reason they experience pain and suffering. I am saying that life is automatically going to allow those opportunities for them. And then we need to help them navigate them, not avoid them, and not run from them. So, yeah, I cannot stand coaches that just want to run them till they bleed and throw up and then, put their high hat on and say, one day they're going to rule the world because I made them bleed during practice. They're going to be so tough because of me. Like, all you're teaching them there is that they should expect authority to not care about them. Even though all those coaches are going to say through the lens of like, this is how much I do care about them. I care enough to make them bleed. And then ironically, those same coaches, whenever that kid misses a game-winning shot, will go to them and will let them know how upset they are. Like, gosh, dang it. Come on. And they'll get mad at them. And this is why we got to prep more. We shouldn't have even been in that situation. We should have been up by 10. They're not that good a team. And then they just layer more and more pressure on all of that. But those are the moments when you can jump in and you can help them navigate. So one of my favorite quotes that I've heard is, as a coach, if you're going to expect them to walk a tightrope, they have to believe that you're the net. And where I'm going with that analogy is, and with this whole little tangent, is that as parents and coaches, it's not our job to be the rope. It's our job to be the net. So it's our job to put them in situations where they might feel uncomfortable, send them to a friend's house and make sure that they leave their phone at home, which might freak you out because you don't know where they are and you want to look at their location every 10 seconds to make sure that dot is still on the house that you could walk to in 5 minutes. But instead, leave that phone at home and just let them go exist in the world and have their own time. And then if something dangerous happens to them and they're on their way home and they roll their ankle and they have to hobble home because they couldn't call you to come pick them up, even though, again, it's a 5-minute walk, like, that's a life experience you're going to help them through. It's okay for them to feel that pain in that moment and feel dumb and vulnerable and scared, and then for you to come pick them up. We don't always have to be a split second away from saving them, because then they never learn resilience. They never learn how to survive on their own. When I cut my finger, I didn't call my dad and sit there until he came to pick me up. I didn't even tell my friend what happened. I just took off, and I had to climb a muddy landslide and then jump a barbed wire fence that almost ripped my shorts off, and then run across a main road of 4 lanes of traffic, and then run into my neighborhood and yell from across the street, because my dad just happened to be in the yard, so about 8 houses away, screaming bloody murder that I need help. and the blood had completely soaked all down my shirt because I knew enough that when I cut it, I needed to put pressure on it. So I put it underneath my armpit and I squeezed as hard as I could while I was running home to try and prevent it from bleeding. And while I know as a parent, you're like, I would rather them just watch a video on what a tourniquet is. Clearly, this memory deeply sticks with me. So it's important for kids to have bumps and bruises and scars and to live life. And it's okay if, as a parent, you bring your kid in and they have those bumps and bruises and all the other kids don't because they've lived in a bubble wrap their whole lives. Your kid is going to be better off for it. So again, you don't need to be the tightrope. You should be the net that catches them. But it is important that they walk tight ropes. It is important that they feel scared and vulnerable. It is important that they feel boredom. It is important that they don't feel included. It is important that they don't have a completely full schedule and they have to figure it out on their own. It is important that we start to bring community back into the very physical local community, that they have people that are next door to them, that are in their lives, that the only friends that they know don't live across the county, and it takes 15 minutes to get to a friend's house. They should have friends that they can easily walk to their house. We need to trust that they can walk to their house on their own and not drop them off, even though the house is only a 5-minute walk away. We need to be able to send them without their phone to go to that friend's house. These are all the things that are very important for society, parents, and kids to learn from. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that it made you at least think a little bit about what parenting means today, what being a kid means today. And there's such depths to this conversation that I didn't even touch on in terms of how kids see the world, their mental health, parents, how they see the world, their mental health, the economics of all. I mean, you could do a 2-year series on just those subjects, by themselves. There's so much information there. So really, I just hope that by listening to this even briefly, that you start to just think a little bit more about what the relationship to your kids and what your kids' relationship with society looks like, and maybe just start to challenge what you do and don't find important in your child's lives and your own life. So take care. Appreciate you listening. And if you do have kids or loved ones, I hope you continue to prioritize them in your life. And I also hope that you are able to start branching out and building a more local, broader community. It's important that we are in each other's lives and not so isolated anymore. So take care.